Effective communication, like so many other things, is a skill that we can practice, and if we put intention around it, can continue to improve in and eventually become really effective at. To start out our conversation today, I want you to get an example in your mind of a time when your communication and the way you delivered it was really critical. It really mattered and carried weight. So go ahead and think of an example of a time when your communication was really important that you got right. My guess is that whatever popped into your head fit into one of a couple categories. The first category is advocating for change. You know, oftentimes when our communication matters the most is when we're trying to change the status quo in some way and invite people along to something new. The other thing that maybe you thought of is a time where we're nurturing something that's essential. Oftentimes this is applied to a relationship we really care about or an essential function or process that we really have to stay consistent and keep right. And we know that if we don't communicate around that thing consistently, that it can degrade over time. So whether it's advocating for change and changing the status quo with our communication, or really nurturing something that we want to hold on to and hold essential, there are three pieces of communication that we're going to focus on today that if you master, it can help you be more effective at each of those. The first is really mastering leadership presence. And when I say mastering leadership presence, as it relates to communication, I really mean a few things. The first and most important is that when you're delivering a crucial message or when you're facilitating an essential piece of communication, anchoring to your purpose is really important. If you anchor what you're delivering, what you're asking someone to buy into or to do or to consider back to your purpose, something that's deeply meaningful to you, why you get out of bed in the morning, it's going to help you have the courage to say things that need to be said. Once we really have that clarity around how what we're saying connects to our purpose, and we feel that courage well up inside us to say what needs to be said, that's when we can really clarify, okay, what are my goals? How does this particular piece of communication or this particular conversation or this particular team interaction that I'm leading, how does it advance my purpose or the purpose of the project or organization that I'm serving with this communication? Once we have clarity around those goals, we can practice and really continue to hone that communication until it's just right. The other thing that anchoring to our purpose does is give us the courage to lead in a courageous way. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when people are tasked with communicating, whether it's delivering a message or facilitating some sort of conversation, it's very tempting to not address elephants that are in the room. But effective communicators win people over and build trust by not being afraid to call out and name those elephants. And that doesn't mean that we have to have an answer. We can just say, hey, I know there's this thing that kind of we don't talk about, and it's big. It's an ongoing problem or issue that we don't have resolved. And I know that what I'm going to share or what I'm going to ask you to do is somehow related to that. I know that it's something that we're going to have to get over as a team. I'm not sure exactly what that means or how it goes, but I still feel passionately that what I'm about to share or the conversation we're about to have is really important, even if it doesn't completely address this elephant in the room. Another thing that it can give you the courage to do is to say uncomfortable things. And just a quick tip and trick for that is to name your fear. So if I'm going to share something, and maybe this is in a one-on-one setting where I'm providing someone feedback, and it's really a critical communication time, I can really take the air out of that, crazy emotional balloon by saying, hey, I've got some things to share that I really want to communicate to you. And I just want to say up front, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable. I'm not sure how you're going to take those things. I'm a little bit afraid that it's going to be offensive, or I think there's potential for you to take it the wrong way. But I just want to let you know that I'm going to do it anyway, and I feel like I need to share this because I believe so deeply that we need to have this conversation to be able to move forward. And oftentimes, just by speaking our fear, it allows us to get past that and help people understand our intention and really assume like, yeah, this person does have my best interest in mind. That doesn't just apply to those one-on-one conversations. That can also apply to a large group setting. Hey, I've been asked to share about this thing. I've been asked to lead us through a conversation. I have some nervousness about that. I want to get that on the table now, but know that I have our best interests in mind whenever I maybe bring up hard things through this communication or this conversation. So that's really mastering our leadership presence in communication. The second thing that we have to master is our communication message. Now, this is where you kind of get into the technicals around what makes an effective communication. And the most important thing and the thing that really runs through mastering our message is perspective taking. Do we really understand our audience's needs, desires? Do we understand what they're coming into the room or joining the call wanting? And if we understand what they need and want, maybe even better than they do, we're going to be very effective at advocating for change or nurturing that essential piece that we need them to join in and do. So that looks like thinking through our audience. That looks like changing our message depending on who we're talking to. That looks like considering the learning styles of the group of people that we're talking to, right? So if we're really able to perspective take and get ourselves out of our own heads and think about our audience, we're going to be much more effective at mastering that message. So a quick example. I might have the same content that I deliver to frontline employees, so maybe someone who's a frontline manufacturing or retail or service industry employee, and I might need them to understand something, and I might also then take that same concept and communicate it to the C-suite. And while that main piece of content doesn't change, I have to change the actionability of it for those folks. What that line employee, that frontline person really needs is to know, how do I go and apply this today in my role right now? And I always want to anchor back to the why, no matter who I'm talking to, right? I think that we really, don't honor like the intelligence of the people that we're speaking to if we don't go back and anchor to the why, no matter what their role, right? We want people to understand why we're telling them to maybe try a different technique or use a different process. Right? But I do need to give actionable steps. So for example, hey, you're in retail, here's this concept. When you go back, next time a customer comes in, you can really advance this concept by asking this question or greeting them this way or helping them find the right product by using this conversation technique. Whereas if I take that content to the C-suite, what I'm probably going to do is stay strategic and really high level and say, here are some principles that we know are true. Here are some things that we see are true about your frontline operations right now. And here's this principle for this gap that we're trying to fill or this thing that we're trying to change. Now, if you want to know how that looks at an individual employee level, like I'm happy to send a document later that fills in all of those details and makes those connections. But right now, my ask is that we commit to this strategy or this conversation or whatever it is that needs to happen. So just a quick example of mastering your message. And then this is where also things fit around using visuals and cutting out the fat. Oftentimes, the most ineffective thing that we're doing is just talking or sharing or writing too much. It's always a good habit to go back and look over your content and say, what really is inessential that I can cut out? What story do I feel compelled to share? What example do I feel compelled to give that doesn't add any value to this communication? And I want to have the courage to go ahead and cut that out if it's not going to connect to my audience the same way that maybe it connects to me personally. So that's mastering our messaging. And then the third thing that we have to master is the leadership space and really owning that setting where the communication is happening. I spent a lot of years teaching in the outdoors to groups of people. And the first thing that we would train to new instructors is, all right, whenever you get that group of people together and you're getting ready to host a conversation or share some content with them, you as a leader and instructor, you look at where the sun is and you orient yourself so that you are facing and staring into the sun. Right? That means that no one else is going to be distracted. Everyone else is going to be able to see your face. You're going to trust your own ability to deliver in that way and that they can see you. right? So I do the same thing every time I walk into a room where I'm going to be communicating right now in my life. If there are floor to ceiling windows, I want to make sure that I'm not sitting there and backlit with my back to those. I'm always going to be the one that's in the space where everyone can see me well and where my body language and my presence can really fill the room correctly. Now, the other piece to that is so much of our communication right now is virtual. And I think that oftentimes if we're a virtual communicator, we feel like we can take the pass that like, well, yeah, if I was in a room, I would stand up. If I was in a room, I would sit in a certain place. I would have my presentation more memorized. But like, I'm right here looking at a screen, right? I don't have to do that. And you know what? My laptop has this webcam built in. No one's complained. I think it's good enough. Well, all the same principles that we would use in a room, we want to use virtually. People are people. People hear what you say differently and listen to what you're advocating for differently based on eye contact, body language, all of those things virtually, just like they do when you're in the room. And so as much as you can, you want to set yourself up for success so that your message can be delivered as clearly and without distraction as possible. If your camera is not eye level or a little above eye level right now, you need to change that. If you don't have sufficient lighting so that people can really see your face, your expressions, your body language, that's something you can address. We all also have places where we're most comfortable. For me, today, I'm sitting on a stool. That's my go-to. I love, for some reason, the way that my body feels and the way that I can communicate from like this weird high stool position, right? Some people really prefer to be standing. Some people are really comfortable sitting. And so I would encourage you to adjust your virtual delivery to a place where you feel really good about it and where you can stay focused on speaking to the people that you're speaking to, making weird eye contact with that weird camera. And I promise you that like everything else in life, if you practice it, you will get better at it and eventually you can master these three things. So the very last thing that I want to share about is feedback. Just like anything else in life, if we are consistently asking for feedback, we will improve faster than if we're just focusing on, what's my observation of how I just did, right? It's our responsibility as leaders and as communicators, if we really want to improve, to make it easy for others to provide us feedback. So make it a habit. Once you've delivered a message, and it can be one-on-one, small group, large group setting, or you facilitated a conversation that was really critical and crucial to the success of a team, you should find those trusted folks in the group and solicit feedback from them and just make a habit of that. In my life, trying to be an effective communicator, I feel like once or twice a week, I'm having a really pointed conversation with someone where I'm saying, hey, how did that go? How did that come across? Was that effective? Did I ramble on too much? Do you think people connected with the message? What would have made that more effective? And I take responsibility for my own development in asking those questions so that I can continue to improve. Why? I anchor back to my purpose. If I'm not fulfilling my purpose, the reason that I get out of bed in the morning with my communications, I'm leaving impact on the table. And I just don't want to do that. I want to continue building this communication muscle so I can be as effective at fulfilling my purpose as possible. And I hope you want that too. If you want help with communicating as effectively as possible, please reach out. We would love to talk with you. And I hope that your communication journey goes very well today. Have a good one.